Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey everyone, how's everybody doing out there? It is the week of January 20th to 27th, 2025, and I'm here to deliver some information about where we're at in the cycles of time. It's been really hard for me to get into the studio, if I'm being honest, this week because I am just feeling somewhat paralyzed in the way that I think a lot of people are. Like, there's a lot of really great media and a lot of really great writing and just really beautiful analysis out there about what's going on in the world right now. And I've been kind of alternating between consuming way too much of it and then like not wanting to think at all or not wanting to absorb anything more at all. And it's been kind of this ebb and flow of that. So I'm, part of me is like wanting to add value to this whole conversation because there's a lot to read and there's a lot to consider at this moment. And so I've kind of just, it's like been a writer's block kind of vibe. So, but we'll just move forward because that's what we do. And we're here in another week of astrology and another week of the human design wheel of the year, really important week for that wheel. And we're in Aquarius season, just on time for all of the happenings that are going on right now that feels super Aquarian. Everything from the Pluto in Aquarius kind of capstone to the United States' Pluto return. We have Pluto meeting the sun in Aquarius this week, which is kind of like this final moment of the 248-year cycle that Pluto has made around the sun since the United States was founded in 1776. So here we are at the inauguration of another presidential figure, I suppose. And we're kind of wrapping up the Pluto return. Pluto was in the last degrees of Capricorn when the United States was founded and the Declaration of Independence was signed. And so now we are a full Pluto revolution around the sun. And, there's a lot of historians that note that 250-year cycles are kind of like empire falling cycles. That's like how long empires typically last. And so here we are at a very major vibe shift, if you will. Although many of the things that are coming to the surface right now have been percolating for a really long time, and certain groups of people have noticed them a lot more than others throughout the past 250 years, honestly. Now it's kind of rising to the surface where everyone is starting to not be able to not notice what's going on. And, not that it's clear what's going on per se, but there's something that feels amiss. And I think that, the title of this episode is a Plutonic Aquarian inauguration because we are, hitting the inauguration right with this Pluto conjunct sun in Aquarius, like right in the first degree of Aquarius. And there's a lot to talk about with that. So we'll get into that today. Another possible title, I haven't quite decided yet, for this episode is The Limitations of American Exceptionalism, because we are in this inauguration on Monday and through Tuesday, we are in the human design and I Ching gate of limitation or acceptance, which is kind of like acceptance of limitations ultimately. And it's an interesting gate to be in because it's this gate that I talked about in last week's episode a bit, where we are kind of coming to terms with the reality of certain limitations of our lives. Of, I mentioned Capricorn climbing up the mountain, and then getting to the top and seeing all these other mountain peaks and landscapes around, and realizing like, oh, I'd love to connect with those without having to climb down the mountain and climb up another one. But there's this limitation of being on the top of the mountain we're on, not being able to time travel or like float through space. And there's a limitation of gravity. I was really happy to be listening to Richard Rudd's Gene Keys transmission for the week about the gate of limitation, and find that, at the very end of his transmission, he also talked about gravity. And I didn't think I made it up, but I was like, had come to that independently. And then Richard Rudd was there saying, oh yeah, like one of the major limitations is gravity, and the opposite of gravity is levity. And he associated levity with justice, like kind of how we are able to lift up and transcend something that is weighing us down, and basically using levity to connect to other nodes in a web, in a network that are not necessarily like the place where we're coming from. And so justice is that recognition of other places and other peoples having equal weight, equal gravity to them, and being able to lift up and kind of connect those in this gossamer web or in this mycelial network. And that's all what Aquarius is all about. So I'm very struck by the visual metaphor of what it feels like is happening right now. And I'm just almost beside myself. Like, I definitely am going into this week of the presidential inauguration with a bit of anticipation, a little bit of that paralysis and anxiety about like, what is going to be real in a week? What's going to be real in a few months? What's going to be real tomorrow? As far as, laws and regulations and deportations and things that are really tangibly, viscerally real that have only been in our collective imagination up until this point, or hyperbole, or, kind of in the ether, but not in real life. So anyway, let's hold hands and jump into this new world together. And it's the only way we can do it. But along with this kind of dreadful anticipation, I'm also very just like anthropologically zoomed out and amused at what's going on within like the collective culture right now with the TikTok ban specifically. It's a big piece of news, obviously, and I went on TikTok last night at about probably like 8:30 Mountain Standard Time, and there was a note that said, TikTok has been banned, can't log in. We're very grateful to be working with the Trump administration, with Trump, in order to make, rewind this decision. And, of course, it was Trump who initiated the TikTok ban back in 2020 as an idea. It was his initiative. And so to have him now be the savior as he comes into office, both with potentially saving TikTok and bringing back a different version of this app that's a little more regulated, a little less free ultimately, and a little more American companies able to get data from it, which is kind of the whole point. He might be seen as a savior by a lot of people. Similarly with the ceasefire in Gaza, very grateful for that. Seeing Gazan families come home to their homeland is tragic and hopeful, but very just so sad, and also so happy at the same time. But the fact that, Trump will probably be the one who's getting credit for that as well is just, it all just feels so, it's like there's this underlying narrative that if you're not following super closely to the subtext, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. And it's very easy to make people believe and perceive things that are not actually real at this moment in time. So anyway, I digress. But what I was saying about TikTok is that, basically TikTok we knew it was going to be banned, and half of America, at least half of the American population, is on that app. And I joined it fairly late, maybe just a couple months ago, and to post some astrosomatics videos. And I found that it was such a different culture of social media than Instagram. And way different than Facebook, way different than Snapchat. All of them have a very different culture. But TikTok really generated these long form videos of people speaking their truth and speaking, finding community and finding massive audiences around what, they're reporting. A lot of investigative journalism, a lot of personal reflections on what's going on, and there's nothing like it out there. And now that people can't log in, I think there's this collective, you think about the amount of people, like literally half of America's population, and a lot of America's population is, children, for example, who wouldn't be on it anyway. So it's like more than half of America's like media reading and media digesting population. And so, they're just like this collective vacuum of like, well, where do we go? And of course, you may have heard of this by now, but there was an exodus. People needed a place to go and didn't want to go back to Instagram, especially with everything that's been happening with Zuckerberg and Meta lately, and this kind of like admission of the dark side, and coming out in massive support of MAGA. And I think a lot of people are just like done with that, and it wasn't a viable option to return. And so what has happened is I don't know who led this charge or how exactly it happened, but there's a Chinese social media app that's kind of like, it looks a lot like TikTok, but it's kind of a mixture between Pinterest and TikTok and Instagram, and it's a lot of things that I'm not even sure exactly what, but it's a social media app, a place where people can post video content. It's called Red Note or Xiaohongshu in Mandarin, and there was a mass exodus. It was the number one downloaded app. I think right now it's the number one downloaded app in the US, and it's all in Mandarin. And it's, apparently they're canceling and banning TikTok because of fear of, Chinese data spying and that kind of thing. But now, like, by banning that, I don't know the number, but like millions and millions of people, Americans, fled and joined Xiaohongshu. And it's just been this unbelievable cultural phenomena where I joined it too, because I was talking to my partner and a couple other people who were like just blown away by what was happening with it. Because it's been all in Mandarin. It is a very Chinese app. And so people are going there and wanting to kind of like use it as their TikTok, but realizing like, oh wow, we're in a different country now. We're like immigrants. They're calling themselves TikTok refugees. And so there's this whole movement of like hashtag TikTok refugee, like, and there's so many people like extending the red carpet, like warm welcome to all of you American TikTok refugees. We're happy to have you here. And there's been just this beautiful cultural exchange. Duolingo, the language learning app, jumped on the bandwagon and created a lot of beautiful content about learning Mandarin, and that language in Duolingo started to become like the most downloaded or the most requested language to be learned. I jumped in it as well because I lived in China back in 2006 for a year, 2005, 2006, so like 20 years ago. And I was there after Hurricane Katrina happened. I went to teach English with an ex-boyfriend. He and I both decided to take some time off of school and to go just have an experience and see another country. And we decided on China because I didn't have my degree yet. He did, but I could get a job there. And I needed a place where I could get a job teaching English without a college degree. So I went to China and taught English for a year and learned some Chinese, and just had a beautiful connection with that country. And since I've been back for 20 years, haven't really maintained my language skills. And so I use this as an opportunity to jump on and speak a little bit of Mandarin, and we had a hugely warm welcome just with my basic Chinese, and just so many people being genuinely curious and open-armed to welcome new people and welcome this cultural exchange that's happening. And it's pretty ironic. It's pretty wild that, the banning of an app for the reason of China being this kind of like communist nation that is purportedly our enemy, and then having a bunch of Gen Zers and TikTok influencers go over and join a Chinese app where they're meeting face to face with Chinese influencers, Chinese creators, Chinese Gen Z people who are just showing how similar we all are across the board, and also having these conversations about like what life is like in China, what's life like in America. And there's been this huge, deep realization that life in China is actually like pretty great. There's been these grocery haul videos where they're showing, what kind of vegetables and meat and fresh food you can get with a certain amount of money, and it's like out of control. But people are realizing that in America, wow, we don't have that much fresh food. We eat mostly processed foods, and it's far more expensive. Same thing with healthcare. There's been some Chinese people asking about, like, is it just my government's propaganda telling me that you have to pay for an ambulance in the United States, or is that really true? And people are like, oh my God, kind of just getting these innocent questions almost about like, well, what's true and what's not true, like about what I've been told about your country. And there's one of the main ones that has been kind of circulating around, kind of getting posted back on Instagram and different social media, is a comment that somebody made about America. One of the big perceptions of Americans and America is that we think that we're free because we have freedom to make opinions, but we don't have freedom to make choices. And that is just this kind of deep realization that, wow, maybe everything we've been told about how bad life is in China and how America is just far more exceptional than this place on the opposite side of the planet is maybe not true. And people are like showing videos of like, oh, you think this is China, and showing this like smoggy, impoverished stock video of like what we might think of China, and then showing like these massive mega cities of Shanghai and Chongqing and Guangzhou, and how they're like incredible architecture and they look like they're from the future. And a lot of Americans who have not traveled there and who have just been kind of like drinking the Kool-Aid of what they're told are like, what? This is China? And there's also this deep appreciation for the kind of humility and the kindness that they're being shown. And just everybody's noticing like how a lot of the Chinese people who are on there, as regular people, don't look as haggard as Americans do. Don't look as just dragged down and traumatized ultimately. And you can see it in their eyes, right? And so there's these kind of like blanket statement commentaries that are coming up through this cultural exchange. But ultimately, it's like a lot of people saying like, yeah, I could learn Chinese. This is great. I want to be here. I love this warm welcome. I love that there's a certain quality of like sweetness and innocence to the posts. And it's not all cynicism and it's not all conspiracy theories. A lot of TikTok was people just having to have a theory about why things are the way they are, and that could spin out pretty quickly to being, like some grain of truth, but some grain of just needing to know an answer, and then it would just kind of get a little crazy. So when you go to Xiaohongshu, obviously, people aren't talking about their government in any kind of negative way. That's not allowed. And there's not as much of like a critical commentary, but there is like an open-mindedness between this kind of long-standing enemy. And it's just it's actually just like such a surprise. It's such a beautiful thing. And there's so many people that are speaking to this, that are just like, you guys, like, this is such a surprise. And it's so like, we're creating history right now. We're like talking to each other, and we're learning about each other, and we're crossing these boundaries that have always been there. And who knows how long Xiaohongshu will be available in the App Store. We don't know. This could be shut down as well for the same, purported reasons. And so I'm jumping on there. I got invited to hot pot with a couple of people. People said I have nice teeth. There's some funny comments. There's some comments that I need to still translate. But I got almost 1,000 followers within a couple days because I spoke a very short amount of Chinese. And it was pretty cool to just make connections with some people there on the other side of the planet and see what they're up to and how similar we all are. And that is so the age of Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius will be shining the light on the underbelly of this, which there is an underbelly of social media or any type of networked connection, and that is it possible for a network to be absolutely egalitarian, to have equal spacing between the nodes, to have not have one mountaintop that's more in control, or that's calling the shots for how the network is going to be laid out. And the ideal of the age of Aquarius is that we have a singular water source. Aquarius is the water aquifer channel diggers in ancient Rome. And so it's there's this singular source, and that water needs to reach everyone. But can that be done in a perfect way? And who is actually still in control of the main water source? It's these are the things about the Pluto in Aquarius, the underbelly of Aquarius, that we have to start considering. And here we are at the first degree of Aquarius, and we're already deep in this. So just had to go off on Xiaohongshu, on Red Note app, because it just, having lived in China and not having had an opportunity to really speak much Mandarin when I came back, and not really having an opportunity to even talk about that experience too much, because it's not an experience that many Americans have, is visiting China. There's lots of other places that we visit before going to China. And it was, this really meaningful, beautiful part of my life that has been hard to reflect on. And so seeing all of these people come to these kind of similar epiphanies about the quality of just how people are curious about each other and care for each other. One of my favorite students when I taught English in China they were all students that were adults, kind of mid-career professionals, some teenagers, but mostly adults who are coming to the town where I live to do a kind of intensive deep dive English language camp. And one of my favorite students was this guy whose English name, they all chose English names. And when I went on Xiaohongshu, they said, you have to choose a Chinese name. That's the first thing. And because it's fun to do that, name each other. And so there was lots of students that kind of chose English names that sounded like their Chinese name. But there was one student who I loved, who was just so deep and poetic and just thoughtful, and he named himself Hario. And one of the names, the first part was was Harry Potter, because Harry Potter was smart. And then the second part was Aries, actually, because he was strong and brave. And then Romeo, the EO part, was Romeo because he was romantic. And so he compiled these three names together into Hario, and to trying, to embody, if you get a chance to rename yourself, it's like, well, who are these characters that are in Western culture that I appreciate and that I want to kind of bring forth into my English language identity, I guess. So I just loved that. And I loved, there's a certain romance, a certain honor, a certain, valuing of intelligence, and a certain valuing of like that type of Aries, like strength, that all of those things are very valued in China from what I saw. And for all of its problems and all of its, obviously it's not like this perfect utopia by any means, but just being able to see the other side of the planet. We're on this round planet where you can't really see what's going on the other side. And it's funny because we're this small Earth, but there's still so many deep differences and also deep similarities. And it's just really opened my heart to feel that this is happening for a lot of people, and just see transcending the limitation of American exceptionalism. And so being in the gate of limitation this week, gate 60, where Pluto is and will be for a little while longer, and where the sun is on American, presidential inauguration day, we are having to acknowledge our limitations before we can transcend them and birth something new. And we've been kind of acknowledging certain limitations for a long time about like, oh, well, the government's not exactly what I thought it was, or, oh, wait, what's going on? And that's been happening for the entirety of the past several years, at the very least, since 2020 and beyond. But we're at this point now at the very, this critical point, right, where it's all kind of converging, and we are recognizing not only the limitations of something outside of ourselves, but also these limitations of things that are within us. Culture, it lives inside of bodies, and so having culture, a cultural like understanding that is now being transcended of like, oh my God, I had no idea. I just believed what people told me for a long time, that these guys over here are bad and that they have it worse than we do, and that we are the most exceptional ones. Like James Baldwin is who I always go back to, civil rights author, writer, thinker, who talks about how white Americans particularly have just been so immersed in the Kool-Aid of believing that we're better than everybody else and more exceptional, and just like have more. It's been what we've been told for the entirety of this nation. And the founding of a nation will oftentimes start with an exceptionalism, like we are better than this, and we're creating foundations, creating documents, creating declarations that are saying that we're better. But then you go 250 years down the line, and it's like, how much of that actually holds true, and how much of it is just a certain propaganda, a certain storyline and narrative that we've been told, despite the shifting currents of what's actually happening with healthcare, with food costs at the most basic, with our basic human rights. Like, are we still the most free, or is freedom just this word that we have claimed and kind of tattooed on ourselves as ours, and are not really looking at the picture? So, yeah, the limitations of American exceptionalism are being shown. They are having the light shine on them in the way that Pluto shines light on the darkness and on the underground and the underworld. And here we are. We are in January 20th, 2025. And it's all kind of coming to a head here. And then later this week, we move into on Wednesday, it's the Human Design Rave New Year. It's in the Human Design system, it's considered the new year on January 22nd every year, because that is the day that the sun enters gate 41 out of the gate of limitation and acceptance of limitation, we move into gate 41, which is the gate of contraction. And that's happening, right after the inauguration. And so it's almost like, for me, looking at it in this beautiful metaphorical way, it's like contemplating limitations, and what that means is the thing that allows us to then break out of them and start to kind of feel, like I mentioned last week, it's like the basic limitation is like the limitation of the womb as a human. And in order to get out of an enclosure and a limitation, like this space that we can no longer fit in, contractions need to happen. There needs to be some type of movement for something new to emerge. And so we are moving into the gate of contraction. It's known as the Human Design New Year because it is associated with the start codon in DNA. And I haven't gotten too far into that, but the gene keys and human design kind of are both, have at an underlying level the wisdom that we have 64 codons in our DNA, and there are 64 gates in the I Ching, 64 hexagrams, and there's a deep association between them that I have not gone into on this podcast yet. But the start codon, the one that initiates the sequencing of DNA, is 41. So here we are in the beginning of life, beginning of something new, starting on Wednesday. Hooray, we need that, right? And then what's also really exciting is throughout this week, really, we're having a planetary lineup that's visible. And it's called a planetary alignment, or a planetary, what are they calling it? Parade, where we can see multiple planets in the sky in a line because they're in the same side of the sky. And planets are always aligned because they're always circulating the ecliptic, which is the invisible ring around the Earth that all of the sun, moon, and planets look like they're orbiting around. It's within a certain kind of flat plane of space. And so they're always aligned, but they're not always close together. And so right now, if you look at an astrology chart, we have all of the planets, or most of them anyway, in the same part of the sky. And so this is visible to Earth. We're going to be able to see Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in a row this week. Starting, I think it's the most exact on January 25th. And Neptune and Uranus are also in there. So if you have a telescope, you'll be able to see those. So it's going to be, a lineup of kind of from left to right as you're looking at the sky: Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Venus. Saturn and Venus are very close together right now. Just had a conjunction on Saturday, right when the TikTok ban happened, and a lot of people are talking about that, having Venus be the planet of kind of like values and self-expression and kind of like how we put ourselves out there, and then Saturn being like the disciplinarian boundary setter who's like, nope. And so the TikTok ban happened just right on the day that Venus and Saturn came together in the sky. But they'll still be very close throughout the week, so you'll be able to look up into the sky and see this rare alignment of the planets. So to see the lineup of Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Venus, and Saturn, you're going to be looking kind of south-southeast in the sky. And then in February, on February 28th, Mercury is going to join the party and be close to Saturn there. And so it's going to be a little bit further into the southwest side of the sky as they're moving across the ecliptic. But at that point in February, we'll have Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Venus, Neptune, Mercury, and Saturn all there in a cluster. So however you feel about that, I'm not sure. It's definitely feels like it means something at these times to have all of the planets watching us from, it's from Cancer to the end of Pisces is where these planets are right now. So it's in Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer. And those are kind of like the initiating signs, the beginning signs of the zodiac. And so that also it lends itself to this idea of new beginnings and initiatory energy. And it's really easy to look at how history repeats itself. And I do believe that that is true. There are cycles, obviously. We talk about cycles here. But there's also within each cycle, it's not like returning to the exact same place. It's more like a spiral where once you complete one of the cycles, something has changed within that cycle. And so you're kind of spiraling to a new point. And right now, compared to 250 years ago, the outer planets are in different places than they were. And we're not in the exact same place. So it's impossible to have history repeat itself. We are not the Roman Empire. We are something different. And so while we can keep in mind the lessons from history, I think it's also important to look forward into the newness of what is happening in the current moment. And in this current moment, we are Pluto in Aquarius. We are 6 and 7 planet lineups, and we are entering the gate of contraction. So, hooray, here we are. Our place in the wheel of the year, just quickly, we are still in medicine wheel direction north for a little while longer, moving into the east, but we're still in that direction of wind and elderhood and spirituality, and we're in the direction or the element of water in the Taoist 5-element whooshing cycle. So still in this really yin place of paying attention to what's happening in the earth, in the water, in the flowing space, in the absorption space. And we're going to be moving into a more yang, upward growth kind of phase quite soon as we enter the wood element. But for now, we are here in water. And so let yourself be water, let yourself be yin, let yourself be absorbent of what's going on in this moment. Pagan season, we're kind of moving away from Yule and getting into Imbolc, which is happening on February 1st. The zodiac season is Aquarius from January 19th to February 18th this year. The moon phase is waning away from that full moon in Cancer last week. And then in the I Ching hexagram and human design, we're in gate 60 on Monday and Tuesday. I've talked enough about that, but the gate of limitation, which is also known as the gate of acceptance, and that is known as water over lake. And then from Wednesday through Sunday, or into next week, we are going to be in the gate of contraction, which is gate 41. It's known as decrease in the I Ching, and it's known as mountain over lake. So I've already kind of just gone off quite a bit, but I'll just keep going off, I suppose, because what else is there to do? Basically, let's talk about the Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius. It's an important one this week. And that's happening on Tuesday, the 21st, the day after the U.S. presidential inauguration. And Pluto conjunct the Sun is potent and powerful. It is something that happens every year because the Sun orbits around the ecliptic once every year and hits all of the planets. So last year, the Sun-Pluto conjunction was in the last degree of Capricorn, and there was a lot about the American Pluto return at that point, because that's where Pluto was when the U.S. was founded. But now we have moved into both planets, both the Sun and Pluto being in Aquarius, and it's a different vibe. When I consider a year ago, I wrote an article about the Sun-Pluto conjunction right as we're entering Aquarius season, the very end of Capricorn, and it felt like my attention was on the crumbling of the hierarchies and structures that Capricorn represents in a big way. And a lot of focus was on the government, the corporations, the bigger structures like that. And while, of course, my attention is still there, now that Pluto has moved into Aquarius, there's definitely a lot more attention on technology and on, Aquarius is the sign that's associated with the future, it's associated with technology, that's associated with like innovative thinking. Aquarius is ruled traditionally by Saturn, because it's about creating structures. Similarly to Capricorn, it creates structures, but Aquarian structures are more networked structures, whereas Capricornian structures are more like monolithic type structures. That's how I see it. But in modern astrology, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is the planet of kind of lightning bolt eccentricity and insights. And so I think both of those hold, in my opinion, that Aquarius is both super innovative and forward-thinking in the sense that you kind of have to be to create a networked effect of a structure. And so things have changed in the past year, just as far as the collective conscious and our attention and the types of things that are having their underbellies exposed. Because right now, right into the first degree of Aquarius, we're talking a lot about Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. They're going to be at the inauguration. They're the broligarchy tech bros who are, holding hands with the government in a way that, like tech and Hollywood and media, even news media, used to be pretty critical of. They were like the forces that had something to say that was against the government or criticisms, critiques. And now it seems like pretty much all of those things are kind of holding hands with government. And that's where this transition between Capricorn and Aquarius becomes really obvious. That there's still some darkness, there's still an underbelly that we're needing to take a look at as far as like how those are interconnected. And, tech is a beautiful way of communicating and kind of creating more egalitarianism between different nodes and different classes of people. But obviously, as we see with the TikTok ban, that can be shut down by a hierarchical structure and monolithic structure. So just to back up a little bit into the symbolism between Pluto and the sun as they're meeting up in Aquarius. Basically, the sun is our consciousness. It's how we shine. It's our willpower. It is the creative life force. And Pluto is the planet of death and destruction and rebirth and the underworld, and so you have this like solar consciousness versus subconsciousness, and that's another dichotomy between Pluto and the sun. And Pluto, I like to think of, it's Hades in the Greek pantheon, and I like to think of him as the god of the underworld, but the god of the riches of the underworld. And so there are riches that can be gleaned from digging into the dirt, right? It's kind of this idea that treasure is buried underground. And so Pluto's not like bad and the sun's not good. It's really just, there's a complex dynamic. The sun can be so brightly shining, and so kind of like oblivious to what's going on beyond it because it's only seeing its own light. And Pluto, of course, can be so stuck in the darkness that it doesn't show what is there. And so it's this, I like this conjunction, and it's bringing together an illumination and clarification of the transmutation that's necessary in our consciousness in order to uncover these buried riches. So like I mentioned, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, it was from 1778 to 1798. And during that period of time, we saw the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And other Pluto and Aquarius cycles throughout history before that are also linked with revolution. Of course, we didn't know about Pluto at that time. Pluto hadn't been, discovered by telescopes yet, but as we look back, we're able to see when Pluto was in these different parts of the sky. Pluto stays in a sign for about 20 years or so. And so over the past few years, there's been a lot of astrologers that have been deeply focusing on Pluto as he was finishing up his journey through Capricorn and entering Aquarius. And, that's because it's a huge energetic shift, but it also was because he was returning to the same place in the sky that he was in 1776, the year the U.S. was founded. And so we have just wrapped up what is known as the Pluto return of the United States, and we've been kind of in the midst of it since 2022. So we've probably heard of a Saturn return. If you're unfamiliar with the Pluto return, it's very similar to how a Saturn return works, where Saturn comes back to the same place in the birth chart or in the sky where it was when you were born. And it's similar to how a Saturn return can shake up the stable foundations of an individual's life when Saturn returns to that place in the zodiac where it was when they were born. So that'll happen around age 28 to 30 and every 28 to 30 years after that. So we have like 2 to 3, or probably 3 Saturn returns in our life. And so a Pluto return is similar. It's just longer. It's more than a lifespan. And so it's every 248 years. It acts like a similar awakening. Saturn is planet of structure, so Saturn is kind of like going to show you places. Your return is going to show you places in your life where you need to mature a little bit, bring more structure into your life, perhaps grow up a bit, perhaps. But Pluto, being the planet of transformation and rebirth and digging into the depths to find the riches, this is going to have a very similar type of transformational effect on a nation. And it kind of is allowing us to see more clearly and have exposed what the vibes were during the birth of the nation, and kind of what the underlying foundation is of something. So it's like, it's like a renovation. You're living in this house that was built starting in 1776 and kind of just going about living in it and occasionally fixing things here or there. And then this is like, oh, we gotta go check out the basement. We gotta go look at the foundation of what it was built upon. And we're not always gonna like what we see because it's a long time ago for, to not be checking on something. And so here we are checking in on the foundation of the United States and moving beyond that into revolutionary times. So right now in the US, I feel like there's just a underlying fear of losing control of how things have been. That's the whole, Make America Great Again slogan, is like wanting to go back to just living in the house and not having to look at how it got to be what it was built on. And there's a tight holding on to that idea, this notion, this cultural mythology of what we have been. And I think it's likely because of and despite the collective knowledge that an inevitable change is soon coming, or already really rumbling out from under the surface as we speak. The United States was founded and established by a group of people who were so convinced that their way of life was the best way that they set out to separate and distinguish themselves from the British Empire. And initially, the puritanical pilgrims believed that the Church of England was too liberal. And so 150 years later, the colonists and founding fathers believed that Parliament intended to take away their freedom. And the Declaration of Independence itself was a document forged with this idealized notion that all people are created equal. But we all know by now the truth that this statement didn't include women or indigenous people or pretty much anyone except Christian white men. So, Pluto's job coming back around to this time period is to reveal what's been hidden beneath the surface and in the shadows. And right now, the United States is just deep in the muck of this process. the past few years have really brought to the surface for all to witness the corruption and institutionalized racism and white supremacy and deep structural power imbalances that exist in this country. And that's being now really shown by young people on Xiaohongshu, on Red Note, as they ask questions about like what's real in America. Well, does it really cost that much? Do you really have to work 2 jobs in order to like pay your rent? These are things that are coming up not only from conspiracy theorists and people that are actively digging beneath the surface, but half of Americans who are just like, I just want to like have a place to be entertained. And then there's deep revelations that are coming forward that are showing this or oligarchical nature of the country that has been there, has been in place for a long time. And it's like we've been blind to it for a good number of reasons. It's been swept under the rug historically in the name of upholding democracy, and will continue to be. That's what's going on right now. So, but, it's kind of like once you see something, you can't unsee it. And so right now, it feels quite fitting that as Pluto moves deeper into Aquarius, the leaders of the country are doubling down on their power plays and hierarchies once again. So, gosh, I don't even know. Sometimes I'm talking right now and it's Sunday. I'm like, what is Monday going to be like? So, yeah, like once again, we're in this together, and we just have to know that we're looking at a dark, deep underbelly, and that that in itself has to be a good thing. It's part of the natural cycles of time to have things cloaked and concealed and then have them revealed again. It's like a full moon cycle. We have the new moon where it's dark and dark in the sky and you can see the stars better, and then we have the full moon where like the craters of the rock that's orbiting us are illuminated, and so at various times within the cycle different types of things are being illuminated. And right now, we're, I think, all collectively hoping that this transit will reveal a shift to Aquarian notions like the fifth dimension, that band, saying the dawning of the age of Aquarius. There's like an ideal within that of Aquarius is about community mindedness and power to the people and utopian worldviews proliferating. So I think it's good to carry that in your pocket. Like that is Aquarius. Those are the ideals that we come forward with. But we have to recognize that Pluto in Aquarius is not the age of Aquarius. Like Pluto is a kind of dark figure in the sense that it's exposing things without any concern for like how that's going to shake out. It's just like, here it is. This is the reality of the situation. This is what needs to die, that before something can be reborn. You can't have rebirth without death. And so before the true age of Aquarius can arrive, which I will write a post about soon, there is an age of Aquarius in the future. It's just not now. We'll need to reckon with the Pluto in Aquarius, with the potentially dark sides of the sign of Aquarius, which are technological overreach and AI and cryptocurrencies and objectivity and data taking place of emotions, and not knowing who to trust, and not knowing which part of the network is in charge because it's all so disassociated and disparate, and there isn't a centralized force to put our trust in. And so these are some of the things that come up with Aquarius on the dark side. Also avoiding current moment issues in favor of far off future visions. Detachment and aloofness are associated with Aquarius, and the devastating consequences and losses that can come from power struggles within socio-political revolutions. So we're seeing a lot of that right now, like how a revolution could shake out. What is a revolution? We have, Musk believing in like long-termism, and a lot of the techno bros talking about long-termism as like, oh, well, you know, we're going to have some people, some lives lost, some people suffering now so that we can have humanity exist far into the future. And it's this idea that they're kind of doing it for humanity, like making these hard decisions that are very kind of anti-people, anti-humanity for humanities, and that's this justification that can be a kind of an Aquarian justification of just like, it's data-driven, it's not people-driven. And so there's two sides to every coin. There's many sides to every sign. But I just wanted to speak to Aquarius in that way as well, because Pluto is not necessarily like the friendliest guy in the zodiac or person. I think that with all that being said, the next 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius, the sun is going to conjunct Pluto every year for the next 20 years in late January at the beginning, or in January or February sometime during Aquarius season. So we will have Pluto conjunct Sun. This just happens to be the first one that's happening this week, the day after the inauguration, the day before the rave New Year. And so we will get used to this energy, I think, when the sun comes and illuminates what's happening in the Plutonic realm even brighter. It's like, oh, hey, what's up in the basement? It's like big solar daddy coming and being like, oh, let's check in Aquarius season about like what Pluto's doing there in Aquarius. So this is the first one, and we don't know what we're going to see exactly. We have some hints to it, but it's pretty strong at this moment. So that's what Pluto conjunct Sun in Aquarius is all about. And over these next 20 years, it'll be unlike any time period that anyone living today has experienced before. We can say that without a doubt, and probably far beyond our wildest dreams. We have a lot of sci-fi that has prepared us for this time. You know, Star Wars, Black Mirror, Philip K. Dick. We've been exposed to potential future outcomes for a lot of our lives. And as we know, some of these are utopian, but more of the sci-fi that we've seen reveals the dystopic potentials that could evolve if we don't keep paying attention and doubling down with curiosity on the question, what does it mean to be human? That is the question of the era, of the Pluto and Aquarius era for the next 20 years, as we seek to connect humanity through technology. It's like, where is that line being drawn? And I'm loving just how much solar punk kind of anti-dystopian fiction writing, you know, the idea that we can create our own stories about the future that don't have to follow down like the dark path of the worst possible outcome, because we're creative and we might have been limited by our American exceptionalism, some of us, over the past many, many years, and limited in our creativity because we believed some story, some myth to be so true about like, oh, we're already as good as we can be or something. And so now that that's being exposed, that's being highlighted and shown, and we're connecting the world in this Aquarian way, I think now is the time to reveal deep collaborations, deep creativity that's been latent or just hasn't been exercised as much. So let's get to work on that. Stay creative. I just got a punch needle, like yarn, whole supply situation. I bought a kit for Christmas where it's like you take yarn and this little punch needle thing and punch it through. It looked very gratifying on the ad where I was targeted to do it. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. And then I did one and got really into it. And it feels like literally exercising a creative muscle to do a new type of art and do something that's tangible with fabric. And knowing that like the little Year of the Snake pillow that I'm making right now is not going to save the world. It's something that is helping me feel less victimized in this overwhelming, like purposefully overwhelming time of media saturation. So I honestly wanted to sit on the couch and keep doing that yarn needle poking instead of coming to record this podcast, but I can do both. It actually, by doing that, it let me get a little more like, okay, now I'm ready to talk a little bit. So creative projects I highly, highly advocate for right now, even if they seem silly. I'm going to go off a little bit longer today. It's because I just want to, now that I'm here. I'm going to talk about the Aquarian role in the cycle of life. It's a piece that I kind of wrote the other day, and it's, the cycle of life, the cycle of time is, we're reaching the second to last sign of the zodiac. And I started this podcast and this whole experiment in living life connected with the cycles. Started this last spring equinox, an Aries season, and have moved through all of these zodiac seasons. And now that we're reaching Aquarius and then Pisces and about to start a whole new astrological year in March, it's really hitting me how profound this story has been for keeping me grounded and rooted into the current moment and into the changes that are happening and into the myths and stories that are of my ancestors that are so much deeper and so much more profound than the myth of American exceptionalism. And that sounds silly almost, but it's like, for me, it really has been like, oh my God, to look into these cross-cultural ancient stories that have so many similarities and so many nuances, and are really about our relationship with the earth and the seasons. It's like, it feels almost silly that so much of my subconscious conditioning has been by the American narrative of like how I should be in American society and culture to succeed, and how much that's affected my parents and their parents and therefore me. And it's like, it's beautiful to know that we have more to draw from. We have the other side of the planet, and then we have the stories of our ancestors, and there's so much there. So I'm going to tell a little story about the Aquarian role in the cycle of life, because we're reaching the end here, and it's fun to kind of recap. So, and then next week I'm going to get into the human design gates of Aquarius, because we won't have time for that today. But I wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit and get less specific. And then next week we'll talk about the kind of story arc of the season of Aquarius for the next month as well. So basically, Aquarius is the second to last sign of the zodiac, and it is, because of that, it's a deeply wise, wizened sign. It's a sign that understands that there is vast, interconnected expanse that lies beyond the immediate world of our personal experiences. So far in this cycle of the year, the spring signs of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini have shown us the immediacy of our bodies. They've shown us our breath, our skin, our hearts, our brains, how those function. Then Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, the summer signs, have shown us about survival in our close environments, when to retreat inward, like Cancer, when to express outward, Leo, and when to be of sovereign service to our immediate environments and our local communities. Then Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius showed us about the connections that we make with others, bringing us into contact with people from our present, our past. I'd say, the present moment is Libra, who we're in relationship with now. Scorpio is kind of about who we're in contact with and relationship with from our ancestry and our past. And then those who will shape our future as Sagittarius bounds off to the horizons to meet new folks. And then Capricorn, the last sign, helped us understand what is worth fighting for. And it's because of self-love and love for others that we've met on our journey that we work so hard to climb from the depths of the sea up to the peaks of our own mountaintop. So there's this beautiful story within, the season so far. It's like getting to know our own intimate selves and our bodies, and then our local environments, and then the other people that we're sharing those environments with, and then starting to kind of move out of our personal realm into looking at the larger world around us. So now we're on the precipice of air sign Aquarius's month in command, and we've arrived at the summit of our journey. As we gaze out at the vast universe beyond our meat suits, we can now clearly witness the truth that we're a beautifully interwoven part of something much, much bigger than ourselves. The only question is, how do we embody this interwoven tapestry? How do we transcend the limitations of gravity, of the singular mountain that we currently stand on, and reach out to form a web of shared interdependence with the whole world? How can my seed of lived experience meet your seed of lived experience? In ecology, the first 6 signs of the astrological wheel of the year, which are Aries through Virgo, represent the abundant life that exists above ground in spring and summer. Aries is the sprout that sprouts out from underground, the sprout of the seed. And, Taurus is the flowers, and Gemini is the bees that are pollinating the flowers and helping them fruit. And then Leo is the fruit, and Virgo's harvesting of the fruit. And, Cancer is the pollination process, the bringing back of the pollen into the beehive and kind of going inward to cultivate honey. That's kind of how I see it in my mind's eye. And so those are all about this like beautiful life of spring and summer that's all above ground. And then the last 6 signs, which are Libra through Pisces, represent the process of decomposition and the creation and expansion of soil in the fall and winter. When something living dies, it becomes part of the soil beneath it, breaking down into pieces and merging with other beings that died during the last cycle, as well as the infinite number of cycles before that. Soil is made up of the past, right? And it's a complete decomposition and merging process. And I feel like I'm talking to Simba on Pride Rock right now about the circle of life, but I kind of am. Libra season, so on that first half of the year, it's all life. And then Libra is the first sign of the second half of the wheel. And Libra is the first breath of death. It's leaves falling from the trees and partnering with the ground. Scorpio then is the time when the first still water, Scorpio is a fixed water sign, so the first water, rain, snow, and ice are seeping into the earth and softening the dead plant matter, decomposing it into nutrients. Sagittarius season is mutable fire, and it reflects the late autumn controlled fires that traditionally burned the remaining plant matter above ground so that it could better merge with the soil. And that is something that's being talked about a lot right now with the LA fires and indigenous land stewardship and the wisdom that's coming through that we have always taken that step to help soil be better through burning. It's not just to get rid of the dead stuff that's above ground that causes a fire hazard. It's actually to help add carbon into the soil and break open seeds that can only be broken up with fire. So Sagittarius is like this part of the life cycle that we've kind of missed as we went away from those controlled burns in late autumn. Capricorn, after Sagittarius, the water, sea goat, and the mountain is cardinal earth, and cardinal means initiatory or new. So I see Capricorn as the official creation of brand new soil, brand new earth that happens through the wintry erosion of rock mixed with the composted life from the previous cycle. So Capricorn is like doing the hard work to break down the rock and the sand and the other bits of non-living things and to be able to mix them in with the living elements and create new earth. So Capricorn we're here, and the soil beneath us is rich. It's been created on the onset of Aquarius season. It feels as rich as the tapestry of sky, land, and water that we see from the top of the mountain peak that Capricorn stands on. And it is only in this rich soil, a soil that's taken so much time to cultivate and create through so many different living processes, that Aquarius can easily connect each seed together through a network of aerated pathways. And so if we're looking at the network of Aquarius in a soil-based level, I equate it to mycelium. And it is the living body of fungi that will aerate the soil to allow the seeds to grow out of it and to be planted deep within it in Pisces season. So Aquarius is an air sign, but it's often confused for a water sign since its totem is the water bearer and its glyph is two kind of symbols that look like flowing water. And to clear up the misinterpretation, I like to think of the notion that before we pour water out from the vessel, the earth has to be aerated. It has to have channels dug in it or trenches dug in it, in order to bring air in and then pour water in after that. So in nature, the mycelial networks of underground fungi create this aeration. And this is happening so that when the bearer of water pours the liquid in, or the nourishing rains of Pisces season arrive, it can reach all of the communities and places and seeds that need it. Our next zodiacal season, Pisces, is a mutable water sign, and so the Aquarian air channels create structure for that water to benefit the most. In this way, Aquarius represents technology meeting community and humanitarianism at its finest. Aquarius is a connector, providing an active link between our radiant solar selves, our local worlds, our seeds of personal experience, and this deeper truth that we're all interconnected within the greater whole. So that's my little spiel about the ecological cycle of life and how Aquarius fits into it, how the soil has been created in this Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn season through all the composting of the living bits of the first part of the year and generations and generations past. And then Aquarius, the job of Aquarius, the task is to aerate it, is to create channels and to create networks that can most benefit all of the seeds that are there waiting to be germinated and waiting to absorb the Pisces season water so that they can spring forth and start a new cycle with that sprout of Aries season. So, getting back to Pluto and the Sun, Pluto is not the ruler of Aquarius, but both Pluto and Aquarius are deeply intimate with the workings of the underground world. I think the difference may be that Pluto is comfortable in his home in the muck and the mire, and Aquarius is looking for innovative ways to loosen up the Plutonic stuff, like loosen and aerate the soil, bring a little bit of light into the darkness, air into the earth, and create spaces for the fluidic dreams of Pisces to flow through. And so as we enter a new era of American leadership on the eve of this Pluto-Sun conjunction in Aquarius, let us remember the incredible creativity that it takes to transcend beyond the inherent limitations of the self, the body, the local, and the known world. Let us remember the bravery it takes to merge with the great unknown to create something distinctly new. With Pluto and Aquarius, we know the old world we once thought we understood is not coming back. It's time to simultaneously lift off the old mountain, the mountain of our individual, self-contained, exceptional identity, and lift off into the airy network nodes, and also to look at it and look down and understand the same process is happening underground, where the mycelial networks are aerating the rich soil and the roots are growing together and the soil is being broken up so that it can absorb what is coming next, absorb the nourishing waters that will help to soften and grow the seeds of the next cycle. So yeah, with all that, I feel like it's time to do our part in creating something completely different. And that will be gate 41. So just going to quickly, we've talked a lot enough, I think, about the gate of limitation. We talked about it last week. If you want to go back and listen, there's the episode with Lily Hussey. But before that, I talked about the gate of accepting limitations and just the power of noticing where our boundaries are so that we can be aware of what it is that we are wanting to transcend and not just kind of lashing out arbitrarily. So there's gate 60. And then Wednesday, gate 41 is ushering this rave new year in with the gate of contraction. And it is a very imagination-based gate. It's like we're still here in Aquarius season. We're not sprouting out of the earth with something new yet. We're starting the new year in human design with a few steps before that, with the like what is happening to the seeds at this point in time as they lay underground, kind of dormant. They're starting to get touched by the mycelial network. They're starting to feel some water coming in. They're starting to expand and contract in the way that flowers do as they're growing, in the way that we all do as we're growing. We don't just go up and to the right in a straight line. We have periods of expansion and contraction in order to be able to break out of our shell and of our seed and of the womb, or when the time is right. So gate 41 is a root center gate, and it carries the energy of beginnings. It's like an imaginal cell and spark of new possibilities. It is, again, the starting point of the human design mandala and represents the potential for new experiences. Gate 41 is a gate of fantasy and vision. It's a gate of dreaming, where dreams are born, and the seeds of desire for new futures take root. And again, it's like I've taken note of the limitations of like, oh, I have a shell around me. I am a seed. I can't, it's not time to come out of there yet. But I now have the desire to know like what lies beyond that limitation. And so the energy of 41 is deeply creative and emotional, and it's driven by the urge to bring dreams into reality. It has a pressure, because the root center gate in the body graph, so it has a pressure to imagine a better future and to dream big and initiate a new cycle. There is a certain emotional undercurrent because it is a gate that's just reaching out to connect to the emotional solar plexus in the human design body graph. And it requires that kind of emotionality because the path from desire to manifestation can be unpredictable and filled with highs and lows. When it's used well, gate 41 is a source of inspiration and carries the drive to move forward in life with intention. And it reminds us that every great journey begins with the single step or the ground beneath our feet, as the actual phrasing says. Every great journey begins with the ground beneath your feet. And I love that, connecting to soil once again. But what is happening in the ground beneath our feet now at this time of year? As it's cold and it feels like there's nothing alive. But what is alive is sparks of imagination. In the gene keys, 41 has the shadow of fantasy, the gift of anticipation, and the city of emanation. So that feels appropriate for this week as well. It's like, feeling the limitations of American exceptionalism, check, and then hitting Wednesday and being anticipation, like what's happening next. Having fantasies about how it doesn't have to be so bad, or I don't know. It feels very, very relevant for this certain moment in time. But at the shadow frequency, gate 41 can lead to living in a world of illusions. And instead of acting on desires, there's a tendency to escape into daydreams and avoid the real work needed to make those dreams a reality. So, escapism is pretty tempting right now, right? Like, fantasy. I think I've carried a lot of hope lately, and sometimes I feel like when I speak about hope, it comes across as like fantasy or delusion. Like people are like, oh, I wish I could have a speck of the hope that you have. And it's not like I'm like just carrying around hope every day. I'm very much a realist and have done a lot of deep dives into real statistics of what's happening. And at the same time, having a 6-year-old kid and being around her and her friends who don't really have a sense of what's happening. We don't have a TV in my house, and I'm so grateful for that because there hasn't been an exposure to the world beyond what she needs to know. And so she carries this bright, sparkly, like inspiring gift of innocence. And I have to have hope for her. Like, I have to. And so I'm not living in a fantasy that things aren't going to be hard and that there's not a lot of work that needs to be done. But I do have hope. So just wanted to clarify the difference there that I feel. I think that a lot of work is needed. A lot of creativity is needed, ultimately, is what I keep leaning into. Imagination is needed more than anything right now. At the gift level of 41, anticipation, it's about fantasy transforming into anticipation when we begin to trust the natural timing of life and embrace excitement of something new, but also stay grounded in the present moment. So this is quite a gift because living within anticipation of like, I want something to happen, but it can't be happening quite yet. It's divine timing kind of idea. That's really, really hard for us to do, especially in this American culture, I think, is wait or know that it's not the right time, right? And so living with a sense of anticipation, but not rushing into anything and not letting that anticipation get you down, depress you, that's a true gift, I think. And then the city level here is emanation. So at the highest expression, gate 41 transcends desire and becomes a pure emanation of creative energy. It's a state of being where imagination flows effortlessly, creating beauty and possibility without attachment or expectation. So, creative energy, that's really what we're about right now. Like, envisioning the futures together, letting our seed of imagination send out energetic frequencies to other seeds. We're not hatching yet. We're not sprouting into our new life, but we are energetically sitting in our robes in this cold, dang weather. It's freezing where I am, but I'm sitting here and not letting that collapse me, but letting the absorption of this, what's going on, what's flowing through the soil, come into my body, and also letting things come out of me when they need to. So emanating creative brilliance. In the I Ching, gate 41 is known as decrease, and this hexagram is about simplifying life and focusing energy on what truly matters and letting go of excess, creating space for new opportunities to emerge. We're still in this yin water phase of the year where we, don't need to hold on to every possible bit of information or possible solution. It's really just allowing more spaciousness to sit with it and to decrease. Like, we are in a decreased energy right now. We're having this very subtle contraction happening as we sit like seeds underground. So, limitation is a blessing. That's what we have to have learned in the past gate, right? That we, through our limiting shell of our seed, we are refining our desires and focusing our energy on what is most aligned with our higher purpose. So that's the ins and outs of 41. It's just, it's like an imaginal cell. I feel like that's an overused metaphor these days, but just like when caterpillars transform into butterflies, the cells within their bodies in the cocoon and the chrysalis become imaginal cells, where they only have like an imagination of what they are going to become in the next iteration of themselves. They don't stay the same type of cells. And so I think that's where we're at right now. We're like in this imaginal cell world. And how do we act? How do we operate when we're in a place of like pure imagination, but can't do the action yet? It's a really hard place to be in such a young, focused, and like action-driven culture. But the more we can sit underground, the more we can focus on our desires, like our true deep desires of what we want, the better, more beautiful world we dream is possible. And the more we nurture those dreams and keep their dreams close to our chest and underground, give them space to grow and remain grounded in our actions. Like in my Qigong class, my teacher is always talking about the difference between collapse and surrender. And I think that's such a huge thing to keep in mind right now, that like surrendering does not mean giving up. Surrendering does not mean collapsing and becoming just like within, closed off within ourselves. But surrendering is like allowing ourselves to absorb what is coming through that's important, what nutrients are coming through the soil right now that are important for our future growth, and just remaining absorbent, remaining open to possibilities and to the things that are coming through, and not filling up your cup with so many things that you cannot possibly take what is important when it comes to you. So at this point in time, in this point of the wheel of the year, I'd say just use your imagination to envision the life you want without getting lost in the daydreams. Take small baby steps toward turning your visions into reality, and have patience and trust in the unfolding process, as hard as that is to do right now. I think Gate 41 is really just calling us this week to embrace that power of imagination and creativity, while also staying grounded in the world and trusting that things have to die before they're born, and that the more that we put into our emergent dreams before they're born, the better a chance we will have of survival as we sprout out above the surface. So, yeah, it's a week of a lot of unknowns, a week of a lot of intense anticipation, and I don't have answers for what the best things to do are, but I would say trust in the slowness, trust in your people that you have within your network, that you have built a sense of safety and comfort around. And don't move too fast, don't jump to too many conclusions, and don't try to figure everything out in the moment. We're going to use this limitation in order to understand what it is that we deeply, deeply desire to move toward. So with that, I will say goodbye, and thank you for listening to my rambles. And I hope you have a beautiful week, a beautiful rave new year if you're celebrating the human design wheel of the year. I love just the idea of thinking about different times of the year as New Year's, and what new actually means and when something begins, because you can kind of choose any gate of the year or any zodiac season in certain ways to say, oh, this is the beginning, but this one makes a lot of sense. So happy planetary lineup, happy rave new year, and happy seedling of something new, a new beginning. And thank you so much for being here. Follow me on Instagram at astro.somatics or Cycles of Time podcast. No longer on TikTok for now, I guess. You can find me on Xiaohongshu. I keep making that wrong, but you can find me there too. My name is Astrea, Astraea, who is a Greek goddess, the last of the goddesses who stayed on Earth as the golden age was ending and man was kind of getting more and more corrupt, and all the other gods went up to the skies, and Astrea was the last one to stay on Earth. So I just randomly kind of chose that name. It's a pretty name as well. So follow me on if you're joining the Red Note for the time being. Yeah, check it out. It's kind of fun. And where else? I'm going to launch a website soon, but I'll let you know in the next episode about that and all the offerings that are coming up in the spring. I am very excited about a year-long offering that I'm going to be doing starting at the spring equinox that you can subscribe to on a monthly basis or a year-long basis. And it'll be breath work for each zodiacal season. It'll be reflection and kind of journaling questions PDF about each season and the human design gates that are within each season. And then it'll have a community component where we'll have a meetup at the end of every season to reflect on how the season's gone, as well as a Discord or kind of a asynchronous community component to talk about how the gates and seasons and signs are showing up in your life. So I'm putting that together right now, but really looking forward to engaging in person and on Zoom a little bit more in the upcoming zodiacal year. And once again, if you get value from this podcast, I would love if you share it or give a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening to. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. Bye.